Hello, everyone. This is the Paddock Pass podcast from the Circuit of the Americas, sort of. It's our race reaction show, but we also have mini interviews from Maverick Viñales' crew chief, Manuel Cazeaux, and Pramac racing team manager Gino Borsoi coming up. Our hot takes, of course, some information on Alpinestars' latest TechAir airbag product presented here in the paddock on Friday, and a feature interview with 2,500cc world champion Kenny Roberts Jr. as well. First up, a reminder for you all to visit Renthal.com for the best accessories for your street bike, and to flyracing.com for quality protection and riding gear once the road bike is ready to run. If you are thinking of changing or upgrading your ride, then you have to discover the naked or adventure bike world of KTM, special bikes for special riders. Have a look at ktm.com to see what tempts the wrists and the wallet. Dave, Neil, it's good to see you via the miracle of internet calls and Riverside, a great program and app we use to record our podcasts. How are we both doing? I know it's very late for you, and it's kind of late afternoon, early evening for me here in Texas.
It's later for Neil than it is for me, and I'm much more used to it, although I did get to bed at 4 a.m. last night, so I'm not entirely as fresh as I could be.
Does that mean you knocked out a roundup of only 11,000 words compared to the usual 15, Dave?
Oh no! Honestly, I'm trying to keep it short. I'm trying to keep it under 4,000 words, so I should be grand.
Neil, were you as moved with Maverick Viñales' Grand Prix win and his history-making turn as being the first rider to win on 3 different brands as evidently he was?
I didn't start crying like he did, but I was pretty moved. It would be hard not to be moved. I think it would take a heart of stone to not be moved by Maverick's success and how he kind of triumphed. And I was just writing my race report there, and I thought, it was quite fitting that we thought Austin was going to be the scene of a redemption story in MotoGP for a certain Catalan, and it turned out to be a redemption story for another Catalan that we weren't expecting.
It was curious because I think at some point yesterday, I think it was in his media debrief on Saturday, Maverick Viñales was saying that it was actually quite nice for him to share a podium with Marc Marquez for the sprint because, they've obviously come up through the ranks. They were racing each other as kids. I think there's a couple of photos around where they're looking very sort of prepubescent and, having raced each other through mini bikes and whatever else. And then there they are in front of an impressive crowd, it has to be said. It felt like there was a lot of people here today at COTA. Even though the weather was, kind of tricky at one point, it did look like it was going to rain. It was very warm, but, it thankfully stayed dry. But Maverick Viñales is just absolutely the star of the show. I don't feel that I have to gloat having mentioned in our podcast pre-season that he might be the surprise of 2024. I mean, I might have already ticked that box already. What do you reckon, guys? Although I did forget to put him on my fantasy team. So the conviction was 99%.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely plenty of gloating in the post-Portugal show, as well as the show after that, and then also last week's show. So I think we're quite used to it by now.
Yeah, this it was an amazing race genuinely really impressive. Because, once he got swamped off the line, you thought, well, that's it. It's another Maverick Viñales special, but he just kept on overtaking people, fighting his way forward, going all the way to the front and then controlling it from the front. And that is the most Maverick Viñales thing ever, in that he always manages to surprise you in both positive and negative ways. And this one was positive. This was just one of the best races, not from Maverick Viñales. This is one of the best races, I think, from any rider that I've seen in quite a long time. And you sort of think if he could do that every weekend, he'd be champion. But, it's Maverick Viñales. Jerez, probably going to go quite well at Jerez, probably go quite well in Le Mans after that. And then it's sort of Barcelona, Mugello. What's he going to do there? You sort of think it's like I have literally no idea what's going to happen next. It's quite interesting, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you're bang on the money there, Dave. What Maverick did today was something that he so regularly doesn't manage to do, which is to keep us cool, to keep us focused whenever things are not going well early on. And he had that with the issue with the clutch getting off the line. And then obviously he was barged out wide. I think it was Martin coming under Pecco, who had to lift up, and then Maverick had to lift up, go off track. And yeah, just it was clear that he had such a massive advantage over the rest of the guys in the final sector through those last 3 rights and then the 2 lefts. He was just overtaking people for fun into that final turn. So impressive to watch. But yeah, just loved how he kept his calm, because so often Maverick starts badly and he just goes missing for the first half of the race. But I think he said in this post-race interview, not today. Like, I'm not letting this happen today. And it was a joy to behold watching him make that comeback. And it wasn't just today, it was the whole weekend. He was fantastic. Brilliant pole position yesterday, really accomplished ride in the sprint race. The Sunday race topped it off. And I would say this is the strongest we've seen Maverick since that first kind of 5-6 race spell we had in 2017 when he had just moved to Yamaha and everyone was expecting him to jump up and fight for the championship. I can't remember a time where he's looked this kind of convincing where you would almost bet some money on him.
We'll talk a little bit more about Maverick in a moment, and also, we have the interview with Manuel Cazeaux. But first of all, guys, it was an amazing race, wasn't it? I mean, just give me your sort of grades, because I think the first half of the MotoGP Grand Prix was run like it was a sprint. And do we have to give immense credit to Pedro Acosta once more for just mixing things up and just being a bit of an annoying mosquito in the middle of the leading pack?
Yes, of course. I mean, like all hail the new king. He's just absolutely fearless. If you asked him to spell the word fear, he wouldn't know how to do it. He's got absolutely no. And what I love about him is he, it's supposed to be difficult to overtake. He's not paying, he's just ignoring that. He's not taking any, not taking any notice of this difficulty in overtaking. He just sort of goes for it. So, yes, that definitely mixes it up. But I think also there was we seem to have a little bit of a parity of performance, which is good. And I think also, obviously having Mark on a Ducati helps. And I think also, maybe this is something we could talk about a little bit later, but nobody has been complaining about front tire pressure and problems with that. And I think they found a few solutions to that. And I think maybe also that this is a track where it doesn't play up so much.
So what's your grade for the Grand Prix, Dave?
Do you know what? I'm going to give it a 9. I enjoyed it. Enjoyed it a lot.
Neil, what was your... Actually, before I come to you, Neil, I'm going to mention my grade. I'm going to give it a good 8, purely because there seemed to be more people here. The paddock was absolutely rammed. There seemed to be a lot of tours going on. There was invited guests, media. There seemed like a lot of people who were... I don't know if it's maybe just recency bias with the Liberty Media deal, but it felt there was a lot of people here checking out MotoGP for the first time. It seemed like a lot of wide eyes or a lot of curiosity. Usually when we come to MotoGP races, we see a lot of people decked out in apparel. You see a lot of hardcore fans. It seemed like there were more general spread of people just fascinated by what MotoGP is. So if that is the case, and we don't quite know the crowd numbers yet, because they don't tend to be published by the promoters here, then fantastic.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to say. No, they're not going to publish the attendance figures, which I think is always a bit of a concern.
What was your grade, Neil?
I'll go with 9, just like Dave. I mean, I wasn't in COTA this year, as you know, but we've had so many stinkers and snore fests of MotoGP races around the track, and I was kind of thinking after yesterday's sprint, which started well but fizzled out toward the end, I was kind of fearing something like that would happen again. But the first 13 laps were sensational, like among the best MotoGP racing I can remember in the last couple of years. And yeah, there was drama, excitement, great storylines. So I thought it was a really top GP one, definitely to remember.
There's plenty of moments to pick from, but I'm going to mention one that was quite humorous, because in the Moto3 race we saw a collision between Ivan Otola and Stefano Nepa. And there was what seemed to be a little bit of afters, but in the media centre here on the big beamer on the large screen, we saw the image of Nepa starting to run towards Ortola, and you think, well, he's going to clock him, he's going to, have it out with him. And then the TV director cut it away back to the racing, and everyone was like, whoa, boo, because we wanted to see what was going to happen. But then, of course, we saw later on that, Nepo was actually trying to just had to wrestle his motorcycle away from Ortola, who wanted to jump on the wrong Moto3 bike and get back in the grid, which was generally bizarre thing to watch. So I think that was, just because it was so unusual, that was my moment of the Grand Prix. What was yours, Neil?
My moment of the Grand Prix was watching Maverick Viñales' almost immediate reaction after the race when he was talking to Spanish broadcaster DAZN, and he was getting very emotional, just speaking about the kind of journey that he's been on since 2021. And I will admit that I've written Maverick off plenty of times on this podcast, not least in 2021 when I thought his career was probably over after the kind of Yamaha debacle. But for him to kind of come back in this kind of style, especially after such a lackluster preseason as well. I mean, I know you backed him, Ad, but there really wasn't a great deal of evidence other than, I feel, a bit of good faith in your behalf to suggest that this was kind of in Maverick at the start of the season. And just to kind of, despite criticizing him as a rider, I've always thought he's like such a nice guy, and he is always someone you want to do well. But he can just be frustrating because it is such a vast potential that is usually unfulfilled. So the fact that he is reaching that potential that he has, is great. And I thought it was just lovely to see him so emotional and thanking his family, his wife and his two daughters, for kind of being there and putting up with him through all of the dark moments over the last couple of years. I just thought it was quite touching.
Dave, your moment of the Grand Prix is something a little bit more dramatic and catastrophic.
I mean, my moment of the Grand Prix was when Marc Marquez crashed out of the lead. Now, we found out later on that he was struggling with his brakes. It was, listening to his debrief, it was difficult to sort of decipher exactly what was going on, whether the brakes were overheating or underheating, or whether there was a problem with pressure or the pads were going back, but which, you would expect to happen at a place like COTA where it's so bumpy. But yeah, he said, he couldn't trust his brakes. He couldn't rely on his brakes. They kept on responding differently, which is why occasionally he was, he made what looked like wild passes. They weren't the normal Marquez passes. They were, my brakes don't appear to be working, so I'll just try and stuff it up the inside and hope it don't fall off kind of passes. It looked like, sort of reading the body language of everything, like reading the race, looking at the race and the way it was constructed, you thought that when Mark crashed at turn 11, again, classic place to crash, where everyone crashes, well, there in turn 12. You thought it was, he was just absolutely determined to prevent Pedro Acosta from taking his record as the youngest ever GP winner. But in actual fact, it was just his brakes sort of giving up on him, not responding the way that he expected, and he went down. And I sort of think that maybe Mark's brakes also added a little bit to the spiciness of the race, just because he wasn't completely in control of some of those overtakes. He was sort of given no choice but to attempt them.
It was very freaky because, COTA is a place that's very technical. Jack Miller was telling us at the start of the Grand Prix that it's one of the most physical tracks on the calendar. Alessio Spargaro always mentioned that, the riders actually get down to first gear in 5 different places, which is pretty unusual, you have to admit, on the MotoGP slate. And like you said, Neil, we've seen some real snorefests of races here because the riders tend to be racing the track as much as they're trying to race each other. But this was pretty much an anomaly, and we had some really good action. We'll come back to maybe the Mark subject and also talk about Pedro Acosta in a minute. And I realized I got asking you guys about your moments the wrong way round, because we want to close the subject about Maverick Viñales. And as we mentioned, we do have that interview with his crew chief. I managed to find Manuel inside the Aprilia pit box while they were kind of celebrating and breaking things down, and managed to snap some kind of stanchion in the roof, and it all came crashing down. So the audio is going to be a bit wild, but it was fascinating as always to get this kind of feedback, this insight immediately after the race, because emotions are usually flying high, and we don't hear from Manuel that often. He's a pretty decent football player. We do play, pre-event matches, which Maverick also takes part in. So it was good to get some words from him. And here's the audio. Manu, there's a fantastic smell of champagne in the pit box.
Yeah.
As everything's been taken down. Many congratulations.
Especially me that is like taking a shower this time. So
I think the guys are destroying the pit box. But Manu, tell me about the start of this weekend, because from the very beginning, Maverick looked strong. He looked competitive. How tricky was it for you guys to get him very happy with the bike so quickly?
not much really, because the most difficult thing of this season was to find the correct balance with the new bike. This new bike, the 2024, is a bit different than the 2023. A bike that we finished very strong the season, the last season. And on the winter test, we struggled with some technical issues, and we were not ready in Qatar. So the most difficult thing was to find the right base, the correct balance between Qatar and Portimao. In Portimao, when we saw that we found again the correct balance, I was really confident for here. So Friday was everything like we were expecting. Just test the tires and small adjustments in suspension that every circuit requires a small adjustment from one circuit to the other.
I think one of the criticisms people had, or the comments last year about the Aprilia, was the inconsistency. You know, the bike could be very strong in some places and difficult to manage in the other. With the new bike, do you guys feel that you could have something that would work better in more places and give Maverick more opportunity?
I think the inconsistency was the result of still for Maverick a bike that he didn't understand completely, because it was completely different to what he was riding in the past, and the result of me not knowing the bike, because the concept of the bike was completely opposite to what I was used. So there were races that when you see all the races at the end of the season, because sometimes during the weekend it's difficult, but if you see the picture at the end of the season, we were seeing that there were races that more or less the balance of the bike was nearly correct, and he was were the races where he was more competitive, and others that were completely wrong, like Phillip Island, for example. So this was a lot of learning for us to finish the season strong and search the same thing in the 2024 bike that has more potential. The starts, except the one of today, well, it was not that bad, but also in the first corner he had to pick up the bike because Bagnaia was there, I think. So the starts improve, and this helps a lot. So the new bike has potential. The starts are better, and I think with this base and knowing what we have to search for, the consistency will be a consequence.
Lastly, Manu, because I know the pit box is coming down around us and you guys probably want to go and get some dinner and celebrate a little bit. You talk about the potential of the bike, but what about the potential of Maverick now? You've known him for a long time. Do you feel we're seeing the best version of him, the most relaxed version, the most experienced version?
Maverick, if you see his career, probably is in the top 3 riders regarding speed. No, when I say speed, is the ability to go very fast with a motorcycle. No, and now with these years of experience, I think is the time he put together in the same bag this speed, but also this experience to be a real threat for the others, no, a real weapon. and I see him really good, confident. The good results help a lot because you can believe that you are very fast, but if you don't do a good result, you have an explanation because maybe somebody touched you, but when you see the final result, it's an extra confidence. So this helps. The Portimao race help a lot. I expect to fight until the end of the season.
Thanks for speaking to us, Manu, and congratulations again.
Thanks to you.
Good to hear from Manuel Cazeaux there, Maverick Viñales' crew chief, and I wonder if we'll be speaking to him again in the next coming races. As you said, guys, the biggest question mark over Maverick Viñales now is his potential and his consistency. Somebody who maybe, can we say fourth position is dropping the ball, but for the first time, Jorge Martin didn't finish on the podium. He sort of sat down and spoke to us in his media debrief early and says, listen, guys, I've got 5 out of 6. Quite rightly and sensibly, he refused to be drawn on anything to do with the championship, even though he did admit he has quite a healthy points lead, and to take, I think, was it 80 points now or 60 points from 3 Grand Prix is pretty decent work. But then there was also a slight technical issue with Chata, as his team manager Gino Borsoi will tell us in a moment. And it was an issue, Dave, that seemed to affect quite a lot of riders. I think probably the most pronounced was Pecco Bagnaia, the world champion, as well as Jack Miller, who was surging up to the top 5, had a fantastic start, but then just like a freak drop-off in terms of performance, it leaves question marks again.
Yeah, I mean, I think I actually think that Ducati are in a bit of trouble, despite the fact that Jorge Martinez has got off to just a fantastic start. Pecco Bagnaia was saying in his debrief that it was like in 2022 again, where they spent the first sort of 5, 6, I think until the Jerez test to get things fixed, and you sort of suspect that's what's going to happen this time as well. It's going to be a little bit easier for them because first of all, Jerez test is at the 4th round rather than I think the 5th round as it was in 2022, and also a few races later we've got the Mugello test, which will be another chance to try some fixes. But yeah, the Ducati have gotten a little bit more aggressive with their with developing the bike. And they're paying the penalty. They haven't ironed out all of the problems which they had. They have had chatter consistently at each of the races. And again, it's quite interesting that there was no real talk of chatter during any of the testing. It's only really now that it's started to raise its head, which is, it's a concern. It's going to be difficult. Generally, chatter, the more grip there is, the more chatter you have, because it's the grip which is forcing the energy into the tires, which is making them sort of vibrate. But actually, what's causing that is it could be anything. I remember Casey Stoner. Casey Stoner had chatter, I think, on the Honda in about 2011, either 2011, 2012. And when we asked him about it, he said, "Okay, no, it's fixed." And we asked, "Well, what will we fix?" He said, "I can't tell you, but it's like a 50-cent piece or something." So it's basically that's just a washer. They put a washer in something, or they put a different washer in, and that changed the sympathetic frequency in somewhere in the drivetrain, and it solve their chatter issue. So it could well be something as simple as that. But again, Martin really managed this really well, still comes out in front, extends his lead, and, it does all of the important work.
Still talking about Ducati, Neil, the man who displaced Martin from that podium record, was, of course, Enea Bastianini. What was your take on his performance? Because there is a little bit of wider context there, isn't there? When those two riders get together on track, there seems to be more than just the result on that particular day or in that situation going for them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they're the two guys that were fighting for the factory Ducati seat for 2023, all throughout 2022. And they're going to be the two guys through the first part of this year fighting for the factory Ducati seat next year as well. And yeah, it was interesting because at the start, Martin obviously took the lead, I think around the 3rd or 4th lap, instantly built up about 7 or 8 tenths of an advantage. And I thought, wow, this is it. I mean, he's gone. And at that point, I think Pecco was up to about 3rd. And you thought, both these guys are really, really well placed to get a podium, maybe even to fight for victory. Pecco immediately started falling back, just did not look comfortable at all. And then, Jorge made a mistake breaking down into turn 11. Acosta and Mark were soon on him, and then didn't really have a response for the end of it. And yeah, he was putting a brave face on it afterwards, but there's got to be a little tiny bit of concern. I mean, he's already got a decent lead in the championship, but we're only 3 rounds in, and I think it's way too early to be looking at the championship. He is 21 points ahead of Bastianini now, but yeah, he was kind of soundly beaten in that race. And if you compare that to Portugal, where he was perfection personified, it was a bit of a drop down. So yeah, I agree with Dave. This is not a situation that we were really expecting of Ducati. And Bagnaia was saying he's completely confused as well, because Martin and him were having the issue, but Bastianini didn't mention chatter at all this weekend, and they're really not sure where it's coming from or what is the thing that's causing it. So not quite the position of strength that we were predicting of Ducati after such a dominant preseason.
Just to close the subject on Martin, last year I think we were looking at him wondering how he can handle the pressure of being a title candidate or one of the main contenders against Bagnaia. There was elevated pressure in that sense, also in terms of attention from the media. That was something I wanted to ask, Gino Borsoi about, the team manager, when I found him in the pit lane after the race. And here's what he had to say to us. Gino, thank you for joining us, because I know everything's been broken down pretty quick to get packed up and ready to go back to Europe. To be honest, Jorge didn't get on the podium today, but it's still been 5 out of 6 for him. What was your perspective on the race? How did you see things? Obviously, he had a little bit of trouble with the tyre selection, and I guess that was where the performance, it hinged on that, really.
Well, honestly, the performance of the race today, due to the rear tire, was quite, was quite difficult, especially because we had a lot of chattering on the rear, and so we have to work on it. But anyway, where we lost maybe a chance to get the podium today, it's from yesterday, when during the qualifying he made 2 mistakes, which is normal. Also, sometimes you have to try to go fast, and sometimes it can happen. So the point is there. So if he was able to start in the front row, could be another race. But anyway, it's good. It's good enough what we achieved during the weekend, because we are still there. We get some point, which is good for the championship. We don't need to think about the final of the season right now. We have to try to get the maximum result as possible, even with the problem.
We were talking to Jorge about the championship. I think, it's ridiculously early to speak about this thing, but when the team and the rider are P1 in the championship standings, then that's something important, right? It says you're doing a good job. It says the start of the season has gone well. I wanted to ask you if you see much of a difference in Jorge this year compared to last season. Is there a little bit more maturity or a bit more calmness when it comes to dealing with race scenarios?
Well, for sure, he is a bit more calm compared to last year. He has a bit more experience. Of course, we have a bit more experience. We learn from our mistake, and the fighting till the last race in Valencia, it's for us something good, because if you are able to learn from that, so you become much more stronger. And actually, we were able to change our mindset, our approach of the race weekend. Now we are a bit more ready for a Sunday race and not all Saturday, where it's good to get point to win the race, but then Sunday where you get the maximum result, and you have to be ready for that. And now I think we are.
Yeah, because last year he had to learn about being a championship contender. There was much more pressure. There's lots more scrutiny, media, everything, and also for the team. And like you say, you guys seem to be in a prime position now to push on from there.
Yeah, we have to push on from that point. We must be concentrated all the time. We know it's not easy, like today. We know KTM is there. We know Aprilia already show an incredible speed, not just here, also Portugal, they were so fast. So we need to work a bit more, and Ducati have to understand how to be a bit more fast than the other. But in general, I have to say that we are in a, let's say, in a good position. Everything more or less under control, apart today where we are suffering a lot with the chartering. But well, we have some idea. We have maybe some solution for the next few races, and let's see if we are able to go over the problem.
Lastly, Gino, give me a comment on Franco, because he is coming from zero in race situations. As we know, he had no chance to test, no mileage on the bike. How do you feel he's getting on, how he's progressing? I mean, there were some decent signs this weekend.
Yeah, his progression is really good. Then the result doesn't reflect exactly his speed. But anyway, we are able to see the data, and we know that he at the moment is one of the goodest rider on Ducati. For sure, the result during the race is not there. Nobody can say it's true. Because of course when you are not able to finish the race, it's difficult to imagine the final position. But anyway, I'm really happy about his speed, his progression. Sooner or later he will be part of the game.
Gino, thanks ever so much for your time, and we'll see you in Jerez.
See you in Jerez.
Okay, guys, for the second Grand Prix in a row, we're talking about a 19-year-old. His crew chief, Paul Trevathan, doesn't really want to classify him as a rookie anymore, even though we can talk about him being a rookie all the way to the season end if we want, because he's going to be undisputedly Rookie of the Year. Pedro Acosta, I mean, what more can we say? It seems that every rider who comes in MotoGP, the first thing they really have to get their head around is the braking demands, how far they can go, how much they can search the limit. Acosta just seems to have that nailed already after 3 Grand Prix. I mean, it's quite staggering. And, there was a lot of credit given by, the Red Bull Gas Tech 3 team today, because Acosta was very firm in his belief that the medium rear tyre was the way to go after his experience in the sprint yesterday. And it really paid off. I just wonder what you guys, I mean, we're all impressed, of course, but I just wondered if there's anything you saw about what Pedro's doing on the bike or what he's doing with his rivals that is catching the eye or maybe deserves even more attention.
Yeah, I mean, like his strength is quite clearly the braking, but it's a little bit more than that. He's very, very good at braking, and as Steve English pointed out in the group chat, he was saying he can't make an apex. He never takes an apex. When he was leading, he was never hitting an apex at the same time, which normally is a bad thing. But the thing is, he's still fast when he does that. I think the fact that he can get the bike stopped and still get it round the corner no matter what happens, that I think is a real sign that that there's something special there. I remember Emilio Alzamora in 2013 saying at the end of that season about Marc Marquez, in the first half of the season, like the bike was riding Marc. He was, just going as fast as possible, but it was, he was all over the place. It was only in the second half of the season that he really got got to grips and really understood exactly what he was able to do. And it looks a little bit like that with Acosta, where the bike is is carrying Acosta sometimes beyond where he wants to be, but Acosta has the ability, the natural talent, all the rest of it, to correct that and catch that, and still get through. And I mean, just genuinely, I think, well, maybe all of us, like we were all like expecting him to be good, but he's genuinely better than we thought. And like, I didn't want to see him as a title candidate at the start of the year. I think he will be. I don't think he's going to win the championship, but I think he's going to play a role in the championship. And I'm pretty convinced that he is going to take Marc Marquez's record at some point for the best, for the youngest ever Grand Prix winner.
Yeah, I mean, I was just amazed, first of all, that he was immediately up there at COTA, such a difficult track to learn as a rookie in a MotoGP machine. Okay, he's been here 3 times before in the past in the junior classes, but MotoGP is such a different ball game. Yet he was there from the kind of the first session on Friday, up amongst.
Well, Neil, he threw himself down the track in his first Moto2 year. I mean, it was a pretty torrid weekend for him the year before last. And then, to like you say, to immediately get going and qualify second is something special.
It is, yeah, exactly. And, it just, I mean, I kind of feel like I'm just repeating what I've said already this season, but he was fourth in the sprint. He seemed pissed off that he was fourth and he wasn't on the podium, and he got beaten by Martin and Marquez. And he said that his initial impression was you had to attack the sprint at 100% for the entire 10 laps, whereas what he learned riding with Mark and Martin was you actually need to attack it with 97% for the 10 laps. You can't go hell for leather the entire time. And then he shows up the day after and he just seems as though he's taken all of that on board, and he's just a more complete rider than the person you saw even one day 24 hours before. I loved he got a great start, led the race, and then when he got roughed up a few times by the likes of Marquez or by Martin, he was straight back with the pass, especially cutting it tight on into turn 11. It was remarkable. And then even Maverick towards the end, you were sure that he surely had burnt up his tires coming through the field from 11th, and Acosta was still giving him just a little bit of something to think about in those closing laps. So, remarkable performance. And for him to be this kind of fully formed at this stage is something that I definitely didn't see. And I think I wrote a tweet earlier which said it's taken 2 rounds in the sprint for no one to be surprised that Acosta's fighting for MotoGP victory. And that's pretty remarkable for a guy in his third race.
Yeah, I think if I was Pecco Bagnaia or Marc Marquez, Jorge Martin, the thing that would frighten me most is just the pace at which he learns. He learns so quickly. So he does, as Neil said, he makes these massive steps like every single race, like 24 hours, with just 24 hours. He learned a huge amount, and he's doing that every single time he gets on the bike. And that has got to be absolutely terrifying if you've got to deal with him, because, like we're at round 3. What's he going to be like at round 17 or 18?
Yeah, one of the cool things is just seeing how he can come back and attack, because you'd expect a rookie maybe to get into the lead, struggle a little bit, fade back, maybe finish 7th, 8th, 9th. But to keep being strong like that and to keep having the gumption to attack and push for victory, it's so refreshing. And I think it's really just unsettling the established order at the front. So, long may it continue. Before we move on to some of our some other talking points, on the podium today we had 3 Alpinestars riders, and the Alpinestars hospitality was really busy this weekend in the paddock. On Friday, the guys unveiled their brand new TechAir airbag, and we recently had an episode on the podcast talking about airbags, where we had our good friend Chris Hillard explaining some of the development and the history of the technology. Well, I caught up with Chris and just for a few minutes, and he told us a bit about the new TechAir 7X and what's different, and it makes for pretty interesting listening, especially for riders who like to get on track days or who really want to take this kind of technology seriously. So here's the latest on the TechAir 7X. Chris, we're standing here at Circuit of the Americas. You just presented the TechAir 7X, another airbag. There's already quite a few in the range, so basically what is this one and why is it different?
I think, the TechAir 7X, we wanted to launch it here because it is quite steeped in racing to a large degree. But what TechAir 7X offers is basically, it's our most complete system in as much as it's really adaptable. You can wear it as a standalone vest underneath a jacket riding on the street, or you can, if you have a corresponding leather suit like anything that we've ever made for TechAir Race, for example, it can zip in the same way and you can have it integrated into the suit as well. So effectively, it is our most versatile system. It also, probably the biggest point of difference as well, is that it has the 2 charges of gas inside to deploy, and you are able to change those gas canisters yourself as a user. So what it means is less having to send it off for a service. I think that's a real point for track day riders that crash, and maybe it gets frustrating to have to keep sending the suit for service. So if you have the canisters yourself, you are able to change it we recommend up to 4 charges, and then you should change the actual bag itself.
The whole architecture of the TechAir seems to have changed a little bit. I mean, like you say, just servicing it yourself, it seemed incredibly easy just to swap out the canister. That must be one of the big selling points, right?
Yeah, and making it easy enough that it's not so complicated to change. That was a big step with it. From when the technology started, we really, you needed a skilled technician in order to change it. but getting it to the point where a user feels safe in their own work in changing it. And that's what TechAir 7X offers, the same as TechAir Off-Road as well. That was the first where we offered that. Obviously on TechAir Off-Road you expect more crashes in Dakar and in off-road racing in general, so we really had to make that a feature, and once we did that there, we were like, right, we need to do that for the road racing feature as well, so that's why we've got it here.
Chris, it seems like with the TechAir system, you guys are focused on becoming or offering more versatility in the range. There's systems for people who, maybe just ride a scooter or doing a daily commute. But this one, like you say, was more orientated towards people that, dare I say, need it more. The more kind of the sports enthusiasts. I mean, it looks like the coverage as well is bigger, the bottom end of the spine. I mean, it's pretty impressive kit.
Yeah, this one's really born out of the sort of development system that they've been using in MotoGP, in Moto2 and Moto3 in recent years. This is kind of the finished version of that, and ultimately concentrating on giving a bit of extra coverage to the coccyx and the lower back was a big step on this, and just covering areas that we learned from being in racing, common areas of injury, and this covers all of that.
American racer JD Beach is here. I mean, I can tell you guys enjoyed blowing him up. He was kind of like the crash test dummy for this. But then Maverick Viñales also, I thought, spoke really well about the merits of the airbag system, and he's somebody who's been wearing your technology for a long time. Of course, he's not going to turn up and say he doesn't believe in it, but he was so concrete in his belief. I mean, he says he won't get on a motorcycle now without an airbag, and that just shows how far the whole, I don't want to say philosophy, but the product has come.
Yeah, I think, looking back from 2018, I think was the real tipping point for the technology when the FIM made it mandatory across all classes. So then there wasn't any sort of decisions about weight saving or anything like that from riders. They got on with using the technology. And once that became normalized, I think then you feel naked if you don't have the airbag inside there, which is what Maverick alluded to. And when you talk about Maverick, you talk about the guy that crashes on average the least amount of times of the MotoGP class in a year, but yet he's still very conscious about when it does happen. So I think that's really, really good words from Maverick about that, and I think it really speaks to the whole paddock really, and how naked they feel now without an airbag when they ride.
The 7X, like we just said, the back protection looks phenomenal, but Maverick was saying that the collarbone, that sort of area for him is the one of priority. And again, you even asked him, where do you think the future of this stuff can go? And he said, more coverage. I think that was to paraphrase. Do you kind of, without giving too much away, believe the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was proven with the TechAir 10, which still offers the most coverage out of all of the systems in our range, because that also has the hips covered too. And that is our philosophy with it, not just taking the technology into whatever field we can where it can work, but also maximizing it in there. And what comes with that, obviously, you need the canister with the gas charge big enough to fill it, and that's one of the challenges with it. But as time passes, you realize the critical areas to work, and you try and work towards building better solutions and minimizing injuries as much as possible.
Lastly, Chris, you've been on the show, you're a friend of the show. We have the Alpinestars Paddock Pass Podcast Fantasy League, so I'm going to put you completely on the spot. Now, this is going to go out after the race, so you could look like some crazy genius with your prediction. So I want to put you on the spot and say, who do you fancy for, of course, from the Alpinestars flock, for the sprint and for the Grand Prix on Sunday?
Well, I'll keep it really basic. I mean, my team name is All of the Stars, which is kind of corny, but at the same time, I'm beholden to all the Alpinestars riders out here. I think a top three containing the likes of Jorge Martin, who's been really fast here today. Marc Marquez, you can never discount him in this track. And then on top of that as well, you've got guys like Pecco, you've got Maverick, who was really quick today. So I'm gonna give you the top three from FP2, which is Jorge Martin, Maverick Viñales, and Marc Marquez in any particular order.
I wonder if you can actually fit them in your fantasy team like that. It's probably too expensive.
I absolutely cannot, actually. My team, that's kind of a premium team. But we got some. I'm trying to think now who else we could put in there to make it count. Raul is in my team. Trackhouse Racing is in my team, and we want to see a good result from them at their home race this weekend. So hopefully Raul delivers the goods for me.
Thanks for talking to us, Chris. Everybody head to alpinestars.com to learn more about the TechAir 7X.
Always good to hear from Alpine Stars, of course. They back our fantasy league. I'm not talking about the fantasy league because I forgot to set my team, which was somewhat foolhardy. Although I did have Pedro Acosta still in the lineup. Although having Fabio Quartararo, I think, was a mistake. Maybe we could talk about him a bit later, perhaps in the midweek show. But I do want to come on to the Japanese guys because we've heard some pretty dispiriting and dejected HRC riders over the course of the last year or 18 months, but it felt like a real new low. Joan Mir was the sort of cracking jokes about the situation. Luca Marini just had a look on his face as if to say, I kind of knew what I took on, but I didn't know it'd be this bad. And Taka Nakagami was just, he said, I asked him if this was the most difficult weekend, since he's been a Honda rider, and he just said, yeah, completely. He says, we are beyond lost. It's not just, he doesn't even know which thing to tell the technicians to fix, because he just, he says it's not something on the engine, it's not something on the chassis. He says it's unacceptable and unbelievable that the bike this year is even slower than it was last year. And Dave, Neil, I just wonder what your takes were on sort of the Honda Maya. Dave, you first.
Yeah, I mean, listening to Taki Nakagami was very interesting. He was saying, we used to do one thing. The bike used to do one thing good, and it doesn't do that anymore. So there's just nothing good about the bike. He was like saying, he was basically trying to say, do you realise how depressing it is having to ride around knowing that you're 2 seconds a lap slower than everyone else? He spoke for about 5 minutes, and it could have been condensed down to basically sort of like about 5 words. The bike is a piece of shit. That was about the size of it. They're working on a new engine. They're working on a lot of things, and I think they've really got a lot of work to do. Again, I think I said this last night on the Note show. They changed the concept of the bike, and the concept of the bike, it went from short and high, which made it very agile, which made it very good around that first section of the COTA, which is where it was making up the ground, to long and low. And long and low bikes are much more difficult to actually turn. But they made it long and low. I mean, the reason you make it long and low is because you want more, more grip. You want to be able to use the aero, use power to actually sort of accelerate harder and get more speed. But they still got no rear grip, so they've sacrificed their strong point and not strengthened their weak point. So they've got the worst of all possible worlds.
Yeah, I mean, just a shocking weekend from start to finish. One finisher from the 4 Honda riders in both the sprint and the main race. And Luca Marini, the sole finisher in the main race today, was 29 seconds slower than Alex Rins's race-winning time from last year. 29 seconds down in 1 year.
Did score a point, though.
Exactly. Silver linings and all that. No, in fact, he didn't score a point, did he? I think he was 16th.
No? Was he 15th or 16th?
16th. Yeah, so...
Oh, rubbing it in.
There you go. Yeah. Disastrous, awful, terrible. And used to be that even when the Honda was bad, you could guarantee that it would have at least a couple of tracks where it would be decent. But yeah, all that optimism from the early season, from the preseason, that they're starting to take this seriously again, and they're putting lots of resources into it. I mean, it's taken a very short amount of time for that optimism to completely disperse. So yeah, they're going to need to find a reaction by the Jerez test. Otherwise, guys like Marini, guys like Zarco, I mean, they're going to be just destitute.
I think also they've got a test lined up, I think at the end of the week at Barcelona. And then there are more tests. Obviously, there's the test at Jerez. There's the test at Mugello. I think they've also got like another pre-test at Mugello as well. There's a lot of testing going on, and this is also true for Yamaha. There's a lot of tests actually being lined up, which is what they need. But still, it's very challenging.
Well, Japanese bikes used to be extremely good, and two historic models actually were unveiled by the Roberts family, I think on Friday morning here at COTA. Both Kenny Roberts, Senior and Junior, were inducting two of their motorcycles. Actually, for Junior, it was actually the RGV 500 that he won the championship on, and he had it shipped directly from Brazil, I think, where he won it. And it was sitting in his home. It's still got bugs all over it. He said they swapped the swing arm out for some reason, so he was a bit unsure about that. But yeah, the Suzuki and the Yamaha was part of like a massive growing collection inside the Barber Motorsports Museum. And apparently, according to our good friend Matthew Miles, the institution has big plans to expand and really create like the definitive motorcycling mecca for history. So we'll try and do something on the podcast, I think, when they're ready to talk about what they're going to be doing, but hopefully it will extend beyond Alabama and there's a chance for fans to digest some of the historic race bikes. But as a consequence of this presentation, with the Roberts family being around COTA, we got the chance to speak to Kenny Roberts Jr., who's been sort of slightly not vacant, I guess, just missing from the racing scene for a number of years. So we wanted to know what he was getting up to. But I just wondered, guys, what you remember of KRJR and, what he used to do, because that Suzuki bike was pretty special, wasn't it? It wasn't the fastest, but it was incredibly agile and he used it so effectively.
Yeah, he just managed to be like super consistent. You could make a decent argument that his success kind of fell in between two ginormous eras of kind of dominators of the sport, doing retiring before Rossi stepped up, or, obviously he won his championship the first year that Rossi stepped up. He wasn't quite ready to win the championship that year. But at the same time, he was the most consistent guy in 2000 and, was pretty impressive in how he won his championship. I remember reading a good feature that Matt Oxley wrote about Warren Willing, who went with Kenny Roberts Jr. from Kenny Roberts Sr.'s team to Suzuki, and Warren Willing basically was the kind of mastermind behind that championship success in 2000, because Suzuki's thinking, I think, was maybe not quite as reactive as it needed to be to challenge the likes of Honda and Yamaha at the time, but Warren was able to implement a number of changes, pretty radical changes. And I think he went on the record to say we won the title despite Suzuki rather than because of Suzuki. So I think, KR Jr.'s success was fantastic, but it probably wouldn't have been possible without the genius, the kind of the technical minded genius of Warren Willing.
My memory, and at my age, memory is a frail thing. But my memory of that season is also that, like, it was very wet. There were a lot of wet races, and Roberts and the Suzuki especially seemed to do very well in it. It was really consistent and very predictable, and I think that was where it really got its advantage from. And in a certain fact, I always felt that Kenny Jr.'s 2020 championship, the 2000 championship, and Joan Mir's 2020 championship were along similar lines, where the Suzuki in 2020 was the most predictable bike, and that was why they managed, because it was a bit of a strange year. There was a lot of sort of unusual circumstances. Obviously, in 2020, you had the pandemic. And just that sheer consistency and predictability is what gave Mir the edge in 2020, and what gave Kenny Roberts Kenny Jr. the advantage in 2000. But my overriding memory, honestly, of Kenny Jr. is Estoril 2006. When he thought he'd won it and hadn't. So yeah, that was definitely that's definitely, I remember, because that bike, at some point they persuaded Michelin to start giving them tires. Well, first of all, Kenny Jr. had said, look, I'm only going to ride the bike if I have Michelins. So Kenny Roberts Sr. organised Michelins, and then about halfway through that season they got some input from HRC on basically just adjusting the balance of the bike, and they found the exact balance, because the the KR bike at the time was basically a Honda V5 990cc engine in a custom built frame, designed and built by the Roberts, by Roberts frame people. And once they tweaked that, it turned it into a real weapon. It turned into a fantastic motorcycle, and too late in the season to make it properly competitive throughout the year. But still, it was a fantastic bike to watch.
Well, another reason I wanted to speak to him is because of his career. He drifted from the 2 strokes into the 4 strokes, and then, of course, in the capacity change in the Premier class. So I thought, with that sort of looming on the horizon, possibly for 2027, it was a little bit topical, and I wanted to ask his views on it. The interview was done in the Alpinestars Hospitality, so it's a little bit noisy. But thanks again to our friend Matthew Miles and also the Barber Motorsport Museum for helping put that together. Here's the interview, and when we come back, we'll do our winners and losers. Kenny, it's great to talk to you. It's interesting to talk to you. It's good to see you at the Circuit of the Americas. I guess maybe a question many fans of the sport would have, is what have you been up to? What's been going on in the last few years? Because on an international basis, for sure, we haven't seen too much of you.
So Rochelle and I have, been away since 2007 from the racing aspect, and then we visited occasionally to a few of these up until around 2016-17, and then with the whole issue with 2020, and then getting back into it now. It seems like yesterday, but it has been about 4 or 5 years since we've seen the MotoGP paddock, so it's nice to be back.
What have you been up to in this time? Have you been
taking kids from now 14 and 15,
being a taxi driver?
Yeah, Uber, and we homeschool, so we're quite engaged. We like the freedom in America. You can do that. We live in a state and surround ourselves by states in the United States that you have the freedom to do anything and everything, and you're not policed or anything by schooling or...
Kenny, has motorcycles been part of your life much? I mean, you ever since you were small, it was always such a powerful part of your life and your lifestyle.
Yeah, I still watch all of it, and I still watch Formula One, and I try to stay up on the tech side of it. The bikes are changing so much, visibly with aerodynamics and things like that, but I'm kind of more interested in the rider part of it and what they're dealing with. So I'm here in spirit, maybe not physically sometimes, specifically in Europe. So,
but do the kids ride? Are you riding much?
So Logan got to go to, we stopped by Colin Edwards boot camp a couple days ago, and he got to experience his first time on a dirt tracker, my son, who's 14. And our daughter got to watch and say she didn't want to, which is great. And then Rochelle and I got to see Colin Edwards and his wife that we haven't seen in a couple of years. So he got to do that. And as far as the other stuff goes, we go down to my dad's, and Eddie Lawson is near where my father lives, and we get to experience bike stuff and all that, So we kind of choose when we want to, but basically it revolves around our kids' homeschooling activities, and they're into tennis, ballet, flag football, soccer, depending on the time of year. So there's a lot going on. We're not just sitting around. We're generally too busy for what we want.
Was there a part of you though that wanted the kids to have maybe a bit of distance from bikes or racing because of your background?
Only from the safety side.
Okay.
As a parent, I don't want to see. Rochelle has never asked me for anything. We've been together since forever, and I don't. If I could look into a magical ball or whatever we're going to call it and say, yeah, my son could have a successful career and come out of the other side healthy, both physically and mentally, then of course. The problem is we're in America. It's difficult to get to Europe. It's difficult with sponsors and all the stuff, just from the logistic standpoint. I mean, it's honest. Maybe with the way MotoGP is going, that will change for America. But in the long run, I know some instances where, a little bit, a tenth of a second here or there, and I wouldn't be here 100%. So as a parent, that's my worry. And with Rochelle and I, we've done this once, and I see the things that I did that my dad, I would think, should be concerned. As a dad, seeing me do things, getting hurt or having some close calls, that if it was just a little bit different timing, a tenth of a second here or there, that it's not the first father and son world champions. So I don't know how much of my luck I want to push, and with my son, he's around bikes. That's why I want to race. That's why he would want to race. But he also wants to play flag football. He also wants to play Warzone on video games, and he also plays tennis every day. So again, if it was, for me, it's a safety thing and wanting to get them somewhere where if he decides later in life he wants to, then of course. But at the moment,
But did they see photographs and mementos and YouTube videos?
Just started. Goodwood was kind enough to invite us last year, and Carmelo with helping us get there as well. And they kind of went, oh, I've never seen Dad do interviews or sign autographs or have kids younger than them, want autographs and stuff like that. So it's a new world for them, and it's fun and exciting and something different for them. But they didn't have too much with the way our lifestyle is. They only thought my dad raced up until 2016 with the Legends here. And then when they saw the poster, they were kind of confused on why I was on it, not Grandpa.
Kenny, when you come into the paddock, after having some time away from the sport, does it kind of give you a refresh, or is there some kind of memories where you think, I remember the intensity or the demand that this place needed?
No, I'm very good at visualizing what the feelings are going to be, and then sort of bookmarking those or chaptering those, because I can also then very quickly do the cons of all of it. So the pros are you come in here, you get to see everybody, and I jokingly say, oh, this is great. Every year I come here, you're here. And I just have to travel, 1 day or 2-hour flight. And you guys are here, this is awesome. Meaning that the circus goes everywhere, and it's an entire year for the riders specifically and everybody. So it's hard work. So I immediately remind myself of going through customs, going through baggage claim, rent a car, all the stuff. I quickly put it in check of, I miss all of the fun stuff, but I do not miss the other stuff to get to the fun stuff.
We're sitting here in the Alpinestars hospitality. I mean, you were sort of nice. You were warmly greeted when we came in, and our mutual friend Matthew Miles as well has been talking with you about doing some more stuff that almost celebrates your career and that of your dad as well. The Barber Motorsports Museum being a fine example, right? And today you presented 2 motorcycles that will go into the exhibition, and it's very cool to see that RGV. Kenny, it's you were saying as well that it pretty much came straight from the track, went into storage, right?
Yeah, so we, along with my 99 bike, the arrangement of it was to just go, through the factory right to my house, and it's still got the gas and the bugs and my original leathers and the helmet, everything I wore on the podium and raced is sealed in time. And it's kind of a weird story. My dad a few years ago had some offers that I know of. He's had plenty before, and since. And he was contemplating getting rid of the bike because, to his point, he's like, I don't know what I need it for at this stage, or it does nothing for me. And that was sort of really difficult for me to even fathom, because you can't tell somebody how to think. And then I was at Goodwood, and a couple other things happened to where I'm like, God, I can kind of see now what my dad's talking about. Like, I've got a bike in storage. You go turn the lights on, yep, it's there. You turn the lights on and leave. You go to Goodwood, and there's Ferraris and McLarens, and people are excited, and I got to ride the bike that I rode. The kids got to see me in leathers. Graciously enough, Alpinestars was able to make in time for Goodwood on short notice. So I had no ambition to want to go because I hate to travel. But then once I was there, I was like, I am so happy that I went. And the kids forced me to go in thinking that I'll not have a lot of chances to do this again. But then when I got there, I was like, that was so stupid to even think like that because I had no idea how big Goodwood was. I don't do any
even with the British weather, because it was a pretty lousy couple of days for rain.
Yeah, but I don't do any social media, and I didn't Google anything. I met the Duke for the first time and didn't even know what he looked like, which I probably should have Googled him so I could have, known ahead of time. But he was fantastic. The whole event was fantastic for us. And it got me thinking, if I'm a son of a 3-time world champion and I see my dad's bike in storage and it's like, okay, I think we're late for lunch, let's go, and you spend 3 minutes looking at it with no emotion other than, yeah, I've seen it a lot, then what do my kids do with not, specifically if I put my shoes in my son's place, he doesn't know what it takes to do that. I know what it took, and I'm still looking at it for a couple minutes going, okay, let's go. So with that being said, I started to think, is this the right place? And one phone call to Matthew Miles and him saying, I didn't want to ever say anything, but it doesn't do him justice. From that point on, and with the communication and the contact with Barber, specifically Brian Case at Barber, that was my goal, to get these things to what we're going to do, which is to tell the whole Robert story. These bikes are a very, very small fraction of the plans that Barber has for the Robert story. There's plenty more machines and things coming to complete the whole story.
I mean, it's history, right? I mean, that bike it's nearly a quarter of a century old. It's like a mark of the time.
Yeah, I mean, my dream as a kid, and as they should be, is like to have your MotoGP World Championship bike with you. And then when you figure out, life is short and you want to travel and see people and you want to, and then you've got these possessions that they're not in the right place in time. And Wayne, Kevin, they have their bikes up in the, and they're all sealed, and I had the same thing. And I thought it was great, but out of sight, out of mind.
Does it reawaken some appreciation of your career a little bit?
Barber, yes. Being able to have the relationship with Barber has changed my philosophy and outlook on a lot of it, if not everything, because my kids, or however this is going to work, will be able to, in 30, 40, 50 years, see it as we wanted it presented and as it should be, not just at your house on the hill and invite people to go see it. It's a completely new philosophy. I think Barber, through Brian, Matthew, myself, all have the same, like, this direction feels right. The timing's right, and they're gracious enough, Barber gracious enough to be at the, the professionalism that they've taken this on with has been bar none. And I never knew it even existed, right? I mean, it's just nobody's done this. So you can't say, oh, one day my bike's going to be in the best museum in the world, the biggest motorcycle. Now, even talking with Wayne Rainey, he's like, I should probably think about putting mine there. Now you're starting to go, this makes sense. Yeah. So without Barber, none of it happens. So simple.
Kenny, when you look at the bike and you see what's going around the track here now at the Circuit of the Americas, does it make you smile a little bit? Because, I mean, just in terms of aerodynamics, you look at the LGV 500, it's
I think that our bikes have a place in time too, right? I mean, it was the end of the 2000, end of the era for acceleration control, traction control, wheelie control, the two-stroke side of it. I think that the fans, honestly, MotoGP, the riders still miss the smell and the way that a two-stroke can be different than your average street bike stuff. In the future going forward, if they ever did switch back, emissions and all this stuff on a two-stroke can even be zero nearly. So I don't think it's that. I think the four-strokes are fantastic, but the bikes need to look hard to ride. If you lower the CC or you give them more grip or whatever the case, if they're not sliding and wheeling out of the corners, it looks too simple. I can drive a Formula One car as fast as Max Verstappen, no doubt, because it looks easy. So at 50 years old, I'll get in Max's car and drive exactly, probably a little faster, because my DNA is USA. And because it doesn't look, you just turn left or right, push some buttons, and there's your lap time, right? You can't do that with bikes. And as soon as you turn that into that, then everybody's going to say, oh, I can do that. But if these things are sliding out of the corner and they have to fight for grip and they're wheeling, that's what people can't do. And then people look at it and go, I can't do that.
Kenny, one thing I wanted to ask you about was because the technical change in this sport has been quite pronounced in the last few years, and you were also operating right at the top level in a time when two strokes moved into four strokes, and then of course the capacity change as well. When we had the 800s coming through, that's something that could happen in a couple of years here. How was that, when you're trying to win Grand Prix, you're trying to work on your own performance, and you have that big kind of tumble dryer of changes going on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think two strokes ever should have been phased out myself. I think, okay, so I think it's good that four strokes came along, but now I think we're at a stage where we can all say, okay, if indeed the four strokes have to stay for the different and new manufacturers, which they do. So you have to be realistic about that, specifically myself, right? So we're here with four strokes. The biggest mistake, and one that looks like its history is going to repeat itself, is the 850s or the 800s. Now, I understand bore and stroke, and I understand all the stuff they're saying, but my position is, and the riders, I spoke with Marc Marquez earlier this morning. I'm not out of touch with him, and if he says, no, Kenny, 850s will be great, 850s are great. But my experience is we need to, if you want to control the lap time and the corner speeds, control the tires. And take away forms of traction control. So what I said when we switched from thousands, after 500s to thousands, to 800s is that's the wrong way. Go 1200 cc and less grip and traction control. That's it. So if you're able to, in a perfect world, build a tire or have a tire company that specifically works on edge grip and not acceleration grip, which is two different things, so lateral edge grip, and reduces forward acceleration grip, which is easily done on a tire, that will slow the bike's corner speed down. Exiting the corners onto straightaways as the speed they're doing now, if that's what you're trying to do. If you're trying to make them 20K slower on the straight, that will do it.
Right.
But if you take away weight, it's going to go faster around the corner. It's not a rocket scientist, right? So give them more horsepower than they can deal with, take away the traction control so they have to manipulate it, but give them a safe tire that they can flick on the side and it turns. As soon as they pick it up to accelerate, it should spin, which is going to make them tentative with the throttle, because you want them to have to fight for the grip, just like you do in dirt track. Everybody has too much horsepower and they can't go forward, so they all fight to go forward. You do that and you'll accomplish the same thing with a smoke show. Wheeling and sliding and tire smoking, and the riders will have more fun.
There's things that have to come together there. Michelin tires, everything else. It's kind of
somebody has to. It's either going to be done. Again, I'll just be controversial or I'll be direct in the comment. It's going to be done through rider safety because somebody gets hurt before they switch in 2025 or 2027. Yeah. It's going to be done before that because there's a catastrophic incident that they can then say this is unsafe.
Okay.
So you're going to do it before or you're going to do it then. And then when you do it then, you're going to see the feedback of Kenny was completely wrong in 2027, 28, 29. It was the best racing. Or it's going to be right. And I don't care if the bikes have the same torque now and they're a little slower. They still need to spin sideways and wheelie. That's what the people have to see. If they don't move, if you take away less weight and it's easier to ride, I don't think that's what you want, because the riders can handle. Right now, if I gave them a 1200 with no traction control, not one single rider would go out in high side. Okay. Not even close. They would go out and go, that is awesome. From the standpoint of sliding around. Then they're immediately going to go, but we need more grip. That's what's good. We all do that.
The manufacturers might balk at that a little bit. They're saying, well, that's,
of course.
We need to make.
But this is just a statement or a feeling from one rider who, and so it's not right. It's not wrong. It's just what I think. Again, when the 800s came out and Danny's riding around and I see him in Jerez and it just looks like a scooter and it's not moving, it's not wheeling, it just looks like it's on rails. I didn't see anything that was like, oh, that looks fun. That's just my opinion. Other general fans, I may be completely out of touch with it. We go to a go-kart track and there's one that's set up and it's just a perfect racetrack, single level. Then I go with my family to another one and it's 2 levels, and it's kind of like, that's not really racing. That's kind of like, and which one do you guys like? Oh, the one that went up and down. But that's not, they don't care. Yeah. They have that other one was a lot funner because it had
novelties on it. Yeah.
I guess so. So, again, it's okay to be wrong. I know I'm not, but it's okay.
Kenny, your family's waiting for you, so just 3 rapid-fire questions to finish things off. Your favorite circuit to race back in the day?
The last one I won at, so let's go with Motegi.
Okay.
That's always how I answered him.
What was your biggest skill, you think, as a MotoGP racer?
Being extremely precise and wet weather. Being able to put slicks on with less than about 15 inches of a dry line and doesn't even affect me. And didn't even within a good half a second of a completely dry track on slicks and everybody else is on wets. I did that quite a bit, and that's because of the 500.
And then lastly, the one that you get asked all the time, toughest rival back in the day?
Mine's a dull answer that everybody's going to give me grief about, but the machinery I was on, I never, I got a good chance to go for it 99, 2000, but I never got to develop a rival because I just was never in it long enough. And was always promised the moon with my machinery and had a great relationship with the factory, but they knew if they could get me a bike like the Honda or Yamaha that I would be world champion again, but we just never got there.
Kenny, thanks ever so much for your time. It's great to be able to talk to you and to see you here at COTA.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, guys, straight into our miserable wretches and our victorious heroes from the Red Bull Grand Prix of the Americas. Over to you first, Neil. Who was your winner?
My winner was a Spanish rookie sensation that is going to take the world by storm. Angel Piqueras, everyone. Badumch. Yes. Basically, Leopard Racing's latest rookie hotshot, straight off the production line from Junior GP and Red Bull Rookies, the second rider in history to win both championships in the same year. Came in with quite a big reputation, but has been injured through the off season. I think damaged his upper back in a preseason crash, then damaged his left hand in a crash in Portimao. First time in Austin this weekend, and despite those injuries and despite his overall lack of experience, managed to put it on the box in today's Moto3 race. So I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about this young lad riding the number 36 in Leopard colours throughout the year and throughout the next couple of years.
So who was the rider who was the first rider to win both Junior GP and Red Bull Rookies, Neil? Who are we comparing this to? Aha, the fellow who had the appendicitis and couldn't race.
Neil, next time you're doing commentary, please don't tip Angel for Moto3 World Championship glory, okay? So early in the season. Just give him a chance. Dave, who was your winner?
My winner is Aprilia because, for a lot of reasons. First of all, it really does seem like they've done a good job with the bike. The bike was solid. I think, did they have all of their? No, they didn't quite have all 4 bikes in the top 10. I think it was top 11. I think it was top 11. Yeah, exactly. That's a really solid, performance. Obviously, Maverick was on a completely different planet. He did praise the fact that he now had a bike that he could overtake with. The bike really helped him to overtake, and that was a big difference for him. Aleix Espargaro had a really good track at a track which he calls his kryptonite, where he couldn't be fast. So the bike was good enough to help him do the things. What Aleix Espargaro likes to do is like carry a lot of corner speed into the corner. And you could do that in a COTA, but it doesn't do you any good. There are no corners where that actually rewards, where you can actually carry the speed through the corner and carry it back out again. There was nothing really. There's nothing really that suits his riding style, and yet he was still managed to be relatively competitive, much more competitive than he has been previously. I think this was a really strong. It was a strong weekend for Aprilia. It also rewarded the faith which Romano Bassiano and
Massimo Rivola.
Thank you very much. Massimo Rivola placed in Viñales. They took a big risk on signing him. After what had happened with him at the end of the Yamaha days, really, and it's paid off sort of handsomely. We'll wait and see just how far it gets paid off, because again, you just never know with Maverick Viñales. But I think they had a really strong weekend.
I'm trying to work out some sort of quip between Batman and Kryptonite and Aleix Espargaro, but is it,
too many. Yeah, there's too many sort of comic and too many comic universes going on there.
My winner is Joe Roberts. Maybe I should really say Sergio Garcia for that, fantastic victory in Moto2. But, Roberts said, I think he hit a false neutral at some point, but he was threatening to, seize the lead and win the Grand Prix. Neil, you'll know this. Who was the last American rider to finish on the podium at their home round?
Ben Spies, Indianapolis 2011.
So, wow. Okay. So quite some time then. So, it's a pretty decent feat by Joe Roberts, and you have to imagine, guys, that he's put himself closer and closer to being a Trackhouse Aprilia rider in MotoGP in 2025. So we'll have to see how that one develops. Losers, who are you going to say, Neil?
I was going to say Mark, but I've actually changed my mind last minute to Miguel Oliveira, because this was a great weekend for Aprilia. The Aprilia was working really well at COTA, and Oliveira was the last Aprilia in 11th, beaten by his teammate Ralph Hernandez, believe it or not. I really thought Miguel would have worked it out by now. I know he's coming into the season on the back of injury troubles and missed the last couple of races of last year, but he's a good enough rider to have worked this out by now. I kind of find it quite puzzling. I expected him to be up much higher. I mean, he finished in the top 10 in COTA last year, despite being injured from that first race crash with Marc Marquez. I find it quite bizarre. I expected more.
I'm going to nominate more of a victim rather than a loser, because the situation with Jack Miller was particularly bizarre. Jack's really popular around here. I mean, you see a lot of Jack Miller t-shirts. He loves the track, loves coming to the Grand Prix. But he had a fantastic start as well. I mean, he was mixing up there in the top 5. I think the team were getting quite excited about his possibilities. But then he said he got to lap 7, hit a problem. I think it was on the left side of the rear tyre. Just really inexplicable, why he had almost no grip whatsoever. He said the tyre was almost down to sort of, base rubber. And from that point, it was just, falling backwards. It's a situation we've seen with Jack for some time, particularly during his first year with KTM last year. And, with Acosta in the same group pushing so hard on, it's starting to look a little bit awkward for Miller maybe staying orange next year. There's always been that speculation since Acosta was confirmed to be moving up to MotoGP. But regardless of what happens in the future, it was just a shame that Miller really had his wings clipped by the situation with the rubber, and that was the case for a couple of riders. Dave, who was your loser?
Well, my loser is basically everyone in KTM except for Pedro Acosta. Not just Jack Miller, who is, he's going to lose his seat to Pedro Acosta because KTM would be insane not to do so for next year. But also Brad Binder, because Brad Binder is quite clearly. He struggled this weekend because of his foot. He broke his foot running motocross, and that I think had a really big impact. But Brad Binder was the rock which KTM were building their MotoGP program on, and I think they've just pounded that down into aggregates to turn it into asphalt, and it's no longer going to be Brad Binder. It is going to be Pedro Acosta. Pedro has proven to be a generational talent. He's exceptional, and if you're not building your MotoGP program around Pedro Acosta, then there is something seriously wrong with you. So yeah, everyone else again. Augusto Fernandez. He struggled this weekend, but he didn't struggle any more particularly than either Miller or Binder. He's having the sort of season that you would expect in the second year from a normally talented MotoGP rider. But there's this lad who's come in who is just on a completely different planet, and he's making everyone else look ordinary. So I think it's difficult for him, and also it makes it difficult for KTM management because they are going to have to make a decision very, very quickly.
Okay, that's it from Texas. Dave and Neil, get yourselves to bed. A big thanks to KTM, Fly Racing, and Renthal.com. We'll be back midweek to talk about some of the themes that stew from round 3 here at the Circuit of the Americas, and we'll also have a special guest to chew the fat with us. Thanks for listening.